I personally don't remember of any instance of a foreign-led regime change, operational regime change intervention that has produced satisfactory results that both fulfill the ambitions of a nation struggling for freedom and independence, and also made the foreign government in charge of the operation happy with the outcome. Believe that Donald Trump is a politician who would enjoy massive popularity in Iran, especially after he explicitly endorsed and supported the 12-day war on Iran in June 2025, in which more than 1,000 Iranians were killed. Well, obviously, both the Iranian government and the Iranian people realize the extent to which Iran's international isolation has been just notably counterproductive for a nation that at some point needs some assistance from allies, partners, like-minded nations.
The situation in Iran is tense. There are massive protests against the administration, and we are looking at threats and warnings coming from Washington, D.C., from President Trump, if not anyone else. What's the next step forward for the Khamenei regime? What's the next step forward for the Trump administration? To discuss this and more, I'm being joined by an award-winning journalist, Kourosh Ziabari. Kourosh, thank you so much for joining us over here. Let's begin with the situation on the ground. Tense situation, but is the administration, unlike in the past, acting with more restraint than we've seen in the past?
Hi, thanks very much for having me, and I appreciate this opportunity. Well, the protests are going on, and the crackdown has been, as far as I understand, violent as well. It seems that there is a disagreement on how to respond to the protests this time, because the administration in power, which is the president and his civilian government, apparently is in favor of some restraint and less violence. At the same time, the military, the armed forces, and the intelligence apparatus, which operate relatively independently of the government, are, of course, not in agreement, and they believe that they should resort to brute force in order to contain the uprising. But the question is whether or not this will be sustained, and whether or not protesters who are obviously frustrated with the economic situation and with the declining purchasing power and the increasing devaluation of the national currency will, I mean, continue to preserve the momentum, or will relent at some point. And there have been
There was a moment, I want to ask you this, Kourosh. There's a moment, and we'll talk about the economic collapse, but before that, there were visuals of a street being named after President Trump. While many hailed it, many showed it and called it a political act, should that not also worry every Iranian, given that there hasn't been a good news from any regime change orchestrated by the United States of America?
I mean, I personally don't remember of any instance of a foreign-led regime change, operational regime change intervention that has produced satisfactory results that both fulfill the ambitions of a nation struggling for freedom and independence, and also made the foreign government in charge of the operation happy with the outcome. I mean, still to this day, the U.S. government continues to, and at different levels of the administration, either they are senior diplomats or former statespeople, they continue to invoke the idea of regime change in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the consequences of those involvements as disastrous and unsatisfactory. And some of them continue to cite those examples as foreign policy failures. And I don't remember that in Iran's history there has been a moment in which the Iranian people themselves have been happy with with the presence of foreign boats underground, or any foreign government deciding for them how they should live their lives, what sort of structure should be in place. Of course, Donald Trump, like any other popular populist politician, has got supporters in Iran, and there are people who are attracted to his rhetoric and his showmanship and his display of power and masculinity. But I don't believe that a single street just being renamed after him in an act of personal creativity would represent anything beyond that. Just a group of people decided that they wanted to show their defiance by coming up with this idea of just putting up a sign. I don't, I mean, I cannot speak to an entire population of 90 million, and that's one of the fallacies of experts who continue projecting their personal opinions as the ambitions and perspective on an entire nation. But
Absolutely.
I don't believe that Donald Trump is a politician who would enjoy massive popularity in Iran, especially after he explicitly endorsed and supported the 12-day war on Iran in June 2025, in which more than 1,000 Iranians were killed.
Well, also, more importantly over here is how is Iran going to look at not just the protests, but the options that lie in front of the supreme leader? What, according to you, Kourosh, are the options for the regime at this point in time?
I mean, I'm not in a position to be able to read their mind or, provide recommendations to the Islamic Republic of Iran. But what I understand is that, as was the case in the previous rounds of uprising and protests in Iran, crackdown, some moderation of rhetoric, some temporary promises of relief, including these recent announcements regarding the provision of cash handouts to families and individuals to ameliorate the economic hardship and the continuous devaluation of the national currency are some of the incentives that are being offered. So I believe that nothing is going to change dramatically. In the aftermath of the 2022 Women Life Freedom Uprising, again, we saw that for a brief period of time, the violence and arbitrary activities of the morality police were contained and reversed for some time. The vans and those intimidating squads, voice squads were off the streets. And again, after a while, the parliament came up with the most stringent compulsory hijab legislation to even further intensify the restrictions that were already in place,
Right.
ranging from vetting people's social media and using the surveillance cameras of the Ministry of Intelligence and Defense Ministry to detect people who were violating apparently the compulsory hijab rules. So this time around, I guess maybe some offers of economic relief, cash handouts, some maybe austerity measures to contain the tension in the markets. And after a while, I guess things will go back to a square one. So I don't
What
see any creativity or ingenuity in how the situation is being addressed.
What is interesting here, Kourosh, and I watch this very, very keenly, is the fact that there are economic strains that Iran is feeling, and any attack on Iran would have huge ramifications for countries like China, Russia, even India. But when it comes to coming to Iran's rescue at this point in time, we've not seen Iran's allies and partners like China and Russia really do that. What is, where is the reluctance over here?
I mean, in June 2025, when Iran was attacked by Israel, obviously both the Iranian government and the Iranian people realized the extent to which Iran's international isolation has been just notably counterproductive for a nation that at some point needs some assistance from allies, partners, like-minded nations. But nobody pretty much was willing to extend any hand of support, not to defend Iran's territory, not even to Iranian people who were just reeling from the consequences of that unprovoked military intervention. Um, I mean, obviously, the way the Iranian government has conducted itself over the past nearly 5 decades has convinced almost everyone, including its closest partners, Russia, China, India, others, I mean, South Korea, Japan, these countries that traditionally used to do trade with Iran, that there are high risks associated with supporting a government and an establishment and autocracy that doesn't behave reasonably. And also, Iran has not made itself a high value and lucrative partner for its allies. So, because there is a perception that the Iranian government doesn't care about the interest and the national interest of Iran, that its actions are mostly rooted in ideology and aspirations and sometimes hallucinations. I guess this perception has convinced many leaders, including even Russia's autocrat Vladimir Putin, that there's no benefit in assisting Iran at the time it doesn't care about its own integrity itself. So Iran continues to hype its partnership with countries like China or Russia as a strategic and long-term and sustainable, but there is no mutual perception of this sustainable partnership. Because if actually indeed there was a beneficial, deep-rooted alliance in place, at least Iran wouldn't have been struggling to supply its basic military needs from these, I mean, traditional partners.
Kourosh,
So, yeah.
right. Kourosh, we're looking at a situation where Iran is battling and it requires help. Uh, but it's a country that has faced sanctions for years and years. What changed and why this economic collapse that seems quite sudden rather than incremental?
I mean, of course, as you suggested, the sanctions have been in place since the inception of the Islamic Republic, and they have been multiplied and increased year by year, layers upon layers. So the entire sectors of Iran's economy have been sanctioned and excluded from the international financial markets, pretty much segregated, even as the country sits on the third largest natural gas reserves in the world, or I mean, still continues to be an exporting, an oil exporting nation in the OPEC bloc of countries. But this time around, I really attribute the exacerbation of the situation to the administration of President Pezeshkian, who hasn't had any clear roadmap for rectifying a bad situation that he was actually campaigning on improving. So obviously there are, I mean, conglomerates and these IRGC-linked companies and enterprises that are pretty much hijacking parts of the economy and doing black market trade. But what is in the hands of the civilian administration hasn't been handled well either. So he campaigned on a platform of improving relations with the West, engaging in negotiations with the United States. He failed to deliver that, even though he was kind of trying in that direction. But the the talks that started with the US were so slow and so sluggish and so badly handled that eventually things unraveled. Also, he didn't have any alternative, any plan B for how to prevent the further escalation of the situation. The JCPOA is officially dead, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the nuclear deal after the reinstatement of the UN Security Council sanctions, which again Iran failed to prevent, again refused or failed to engage in any meaningful negotiations with its partners to at least keep that glimmer of hope alive. So, and now, I mean, when you see that overnight the US dollar is traded at 1,450,000 riyals, this means that, I mean, that's a serious, substantial collapse. For the average Iranian who relies on, government subsidies or mostly freelancers, working private sector, who are not on government paycheck and payroll, actually, they feel the burden of this overnight shift, more chronically than anyone else.
That's
Your
right.
purchasing power just drops, and even if you go to grocery store to buy a box of eggs or cooking oil or tomato paste, you will see that the prices are actually being multiplied day by day. So this is a situation that's not sustainable, and in a sanctioned economic landscape, this will get worse. There's no way to stop the prices from being added further unless you have a substantial fundamental change of your vision roadmap. A
Right.
sanctioned economy cannot sustain itself in perpetuity.
Kourosh, you have family, extended family, friends in Iran. Are you talking to them? How difficult is life for them?
So over the past 2 days, I haven't had a chance to communicate with the family and friends, mostly because of the internet blackout that has been imposed, and that's a traditional, a tactic, a playbook that's being invoked again in order to respond to the protests. And in whatever national emergency, there is an internet blackout as well. But overall, whenever we engage in conversations, I feel the deep pain and unfortunate situation that they're living through, and I feel personally uncomfortable sitting here in an apartment in New York. And if I were in a situation to influence any development, I would feel uncomfortable asking these people who are dealing with the day-to-day hardships to do my bidding or take
Right.
risky actions in order to emancipate themselves. They are the ones who have to decide what's the best course of action for them, how they're going to help themselves, and how they're going to determine the future. But the nature of our conversations mostly revolves around um, um, what they think about the future, how they're coping with the hardships, and um, how they perceive the reactions of the international community.
Right.
And these are things that we talk about.
Kourosh, in this age of misinformation and disinformation, there were reports a few days ago that the supreme leader has fled to Moscow. In your understanding, your reading of Iran, is there a scenario where you will see Ayatollah Ali Khamenei actually leave Iran, should it come to that?
Nothing is impossible in politics, and who would have thought that Syria's
Assad.
intransigent dictator Bashar al-Assad would flee to Moscow and just refuse to continue ruling over a country which he fought so hard to just remain in power and to control. But things of this nature, the speculation that you mentioned, or similar stories in the past, in 2022, there was a similar story that a contingent of Iranian politicians have made arrangements to fly to Venezuela and seek asylum there because they were already convinced that the regime would collapse in the aftermath of the 2022 Women Life Freedom Uprising, and they're just pretty much ready to abdicate power. So, these are not just pieces of misinformation or disinformation. They're also turning into talking points that Iran experts or commentators continuously invoke in order to e- embellish their analysis. So I have a feeling that in order to not mislead a population that is strained and suffering and in pain, we have to be more careful about what we say as experts, writers, analysts, journalists, academics, whoever, pundits who are just commenting on the situation which people are living through. We are sharing observations and thoughts and sometimes our ambitions and wishes, um, regardless of the fact that this might have real life impacts, consequences. So, and these talking points, I would be the first person to welcome a democratic transition in Iran that would be long lasting, that would be organic, that would be benefiting the Iranian people. But to every time to say that this is different from the other rounds of protests, that the regime is collapsing right now. In 2 weeks, there would be a transition, that people are ready for a revolution. You can call it a revolution, you can call it an uprising, you can call it a human earthquake, whatever it is. We have to just observe the facts, try to understand it, try to be realistic and pragmatic, and try to encourage factual analysis and
Do you
reporting on
see
them.
American intervention? Do you see Israeli hand in the protests as well, or is it all organic?
Obviously, any adversary of the Iranian government would benefit from collapse of the regime in Tehran. And obviously, there have been statements that explicitly suggested the president, the Mossad, the Israeli foreign intelligence, tweeted just, I guess, 1 or 2 days, or just one day after the protests started, that we are on the streets alongside the protesters supporting you. I'm not sure if that's a prudent or wise idea to just put out that tweet, which just very simply, to any sane observer, that would be ammunition for further crackdown on the protesters. But at any rate, we have seen in the past that to assume that just a democratic transition in Iran and the change of the regime is something that is sought by these regional and global powers, Iran's rivals and adversaries, is a bit, unrealistic and somewhat naive. In the middle of the 12-day war, there was a Jerusalem Post editorial that clearly and openly suggested that the region, the Middle East, would benefit from the disintegration of Iran into smaller ethnic groups and states that doesn't represent this entirety of the geographic entity that we know as Iran. So, if that's the idea, then we have to make our evaluations based on what we're saying, and at any rate, it doesn't have to undermine the organic democratic aspirations of Iran. But I'm just saying that these ideas exist as well.
My final question, if you look at the map, you understand the geostrategic position of and importance of Iran. And should there be a regime change, we will not know geopolitics as we've known it for so long. It will impact the entire region, particularly India, that has had a very strong relationship with the current government in Iran.
Again, of course, any change in Iran, and not just the fundamental change of government, but any social, economic, political change in Iran would have regional and international repercussions. And of course, that's not just because of Iran's geographical importance or its position in the Middle East. Because of the historical factors, the continuity of Iran's sovereignty as a country that has never been colonized or never been dominated permanently by foreign powers. For many reasons, and also Iran's population, its size in terms of area, and its ecosystem, all of these mean that we are talking about a major player in the region. But of course, to what extent any fundamental change in Iran would impact its neighbors and the countries with which they have maintained, with which Iran has maintained ties, that's I guess a question that needs to be addressed in a separate forum. Of course, countries like India, Turkey, some of Iran's eastern neighbors, Pakistan, Afghanistan would maybe reluctant to see any change of that nature. But then we have to understand if the Iranian people's ideas and ambitions align with those calculations as well. we are talking about a jaded population that has been going through an extended period of political repression and economic hardship. So we have to just wait and see what decision they will make. If there are individuals or figures competing for power in the future of Iran, I mean, obviously that's their choice, and they know how to play the game of politics. But I'm just thinking of the challenges and ordeals that the people of Iran have been going through. When you talk to young Iranians who have lost their educational ambitions, who have not had a chance to fulfill their dreams because of the country's isolation, because of the economic hardships that the country has been subjected to, as the dynamic civil society, which comprises writers, artists, I mean, ordinary people who are just willing to live a life that is both fulfilling, happy, and also not separated from the rest of the world, from their peers in the neighboring countries. I feel sorry that this country has been subjected to so much micromanagement and so much external and internal miscalculation and maladministration. At any rate, I hope that what happens would benefit the future of Iran, that the people of Iran are given the agency to decide what's best for them, and that their dignity and the value of their life is preserved.
Right. Kourosh Ziabari, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global. Thank you.
Thanks very much.